COVID-19 is having a profound impact on North Carolina school kids, on their parents, on teachers and administrators, as we all know. And while it really could take quite a long time to really fully understand just how much 2020 will change the future for these kids, we are getting a hint from some initial data about how parents are reacting. Dr. Terry Stoops is Vice President for Research, also the Director of Education Studies here at the John Locke Foundation. He's been drilling down into the data and joins us now to reveal what he found. Terry, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
You are looking at enrollment numbers, at least the initial enrollment numbers for the school year, and there are some changes that you're seeing. What's happening?
Yeah, absolutely some changes. And these are looking at the first month enrollment numbers compared to the first month enrollment numbers from last year. And the total decrease in public school population was more than 62,000 students. But that's a little deceiving because if you should break it down into charter school and district school. And the district schools lost about 71,000 students, whereas the charter schools gained about 8,500 students. So you're seeing part of the trajectory that we've seen in student enrollment over the last couple years, with charter schools making gains and districts losing students, except this year district losses were much more pronounced than they have been in years past.
I know it's initial data, but do you have any sense at all, even if it's not from the data, but from your contacts across the public school world, the charter school world, etc., as to why parents might say a district classroom right now is just not good for my kid, I'm going to try one of these public charters?
We're seeing the most and the largest enrollment losses from kindergartners, and that is where I think parents are having to decide whether to sit their kindergartner in front of a computer screen for hours every day, which is what many school districts are forcing parents to do, or leaving that child out, so-called redshirting that child and delaying their entry into school until they turn 6 or 7. Now, this is completely legal. I don't think many people know that you don't have to send your child to school when they turn 5. The law allows a parent to keep their child out of school until they turn 7. And I think a lot of parents, once they found that out, would rather absorb the cost of having their child in daycare for an extra year or leaving or keeping them home for an extra year, rather than having them go in to an unpredictable and really a situation that's really not beneficial to kids. I mean, especially the youngest kids really are not built to sit in front of computer screens. The older kids really don't have much of a problem with that. But for these younger kids, I think parents understand that that's not an ideal situation. And so one option is to leave them out.
I can't imagine having a child, particularly a young one, where you're trying to make these decisions about what is best because it's uncharted territory. On the other side of the ledger, though, I wonder, Terry, if this isn't in almost a perverse way because of COVID-19, that parents are really starting to understand their kids and the importance of a learning environment and what their child's aptitudes are, what the challenges are, etc. Could we perhaps have some sort of silver lining out of this whole thing down the road, that parents are a little bit more connected to their kids and education?
I absolutely think that's the case. I think parents understand the value of looking at the educational environment that's provided to their children and not just trusting that sending their child off to a school is always going to be what's best for them. And not only that, we have to recognize, too, that there are parents that have actively made the choice to send their child to a non-district school, whether it be a charter school, a home school, or a private school, to provide a better educational environment, one that may not require that child to sit in front of a computer screen for hours.
It's interesting when you look at the data, even pre-COVID data, about the breakdown of the choices that parents are making. It still is that the traditional public classroom in North Carolina is the education point for the vast majority of kids. But more and more people are looking at other options. Tell us about your analysis of the data about those choices.
Well, as I said earlier, the charter school increase is about 8,500 students. And so our charter schools across the state, and we have 200 of them this year, are going to enroll approximately 125,000 students. And we're seeing charter schools really in places where we haven't seen them in the past geographically. We're seeing them offer new grades, additional grades. We're seeing them offer additional and new curricula and educational environments. So charter schools are definitely an option that a lot of parents are pursuing. We're going to see a substantial increase in homeschooling. My initial estimate for a homeschool increase this year is going to be about 13,000 students. Homeschooling is going to probably exceed 170,000 students when we get the final data at the end of the fiscal year. So homeschooling is definitely something that I think a lot of parents are considering in private schools. The interesting thing about private schools, at the beginning of the summer, there was a lot of concern about private schools because most private schools exist with parents paying tuition. The vouchers are very limited in North Carolina, so they rely on out-of-pocket tuition payments. And with the economy what it is, a lot of parents may find that they can't afford that private school tuition. So there was concern that private schools were going to close. But I think something wonderful happened in that private schools start offering a genuine alternative to districts, and that alternative was in-person instruction. And parents decided that they would make the sacrifices necessary to send their children to private school because it gave them a superior educational environment.
Homeschooling. I want to go back to that for a moment because through this whole situation this year, I haven't really read or heard much about the homeschool population. So are things much different for homeschool parents? I mean, obviously with COVID, it's different, but in terms of actually educating their kids, has much changed for them?
Not too much. One thing to remember about the homeschool community is that it's very tight-knit and there's a lot of co-ops and cooperative activities that homeschoolers engage with each other. So there have been adjustments in that sense that perhaps they're being a little more cautious in the co-ops and the field trips and the various communal activities that a lot of homeschoolers engage in. But homeschool just continues to grow in North Carolina. As a share of our student population, North Carolina has the largest homeschool population of any state in the nation. And that's certainly not going to change in light of COVID. In fact, it's just going to continue to increase with parents looking for alternatives like homeschooling that provide the best of both worlds, where the parent can be engaged in the child's education, oversee the child's education, and make sure that that child receives the superior education that they desperately need.
That's fascinating to me. Number one in the nation for homeschooling. Do we have any sense of why that is, or the characteristics of a homeschool parent?
It is organic. The growth of the homeschool population in North Carolina is completely organic, and it's also diverse. At first, it was limited to evangelical parents who wanted to homeschool to affirm their values and their religious beliefs. But now, homeschool parents come from across the religious and ideological spectrum, and so we're seeing a real diversity in the homeschool movement, especially from parents that really want to give their child a rigorous academic education. So it's not just about values, it is about academics, and parents are finding that their homeschooled child can far exceed the academic abilities of a lot of other kids because they're receiving that individualized attention they wouldn't otherwise receive in districts.
And there's so many resources now and curriculum, etc. I mean, it's not like you would have trouble finding what you would need.
That's right. The internet is a wealth of information, and not just information, a wealth of support for homeschool families. So many go online and ask questions of their other homeschool families about how to conduct certain types of instruction. It is a true community in North Carolina. I think the internet has a lot to do with that.